Hi, this is DrumWise Meets. Today I'm with Richard Brook. Rich has played with the likes of Take That, ABC and Go West. What equipment do you currently use?
The gear question. Yes. Well, currently I'm with the British Drum Company. They made me a beautiful kit last year it was a particular tour, and I've fallen in love with them. The workmanship's just ridiculous, and Keith, who is the CEO and the designer and the builder, is a massive geek. He's just incredible. The attention to detail is off the scale, and went for the Legend, which is the birch kit with the mahogany ring, and they sound amazing. I've recently moved to this as my main kit in recording as well, and it's sounding amazing. What else? Zildjian. I've been with Zildjian for the last 20 years, and they've been an amazing help to me. And the gear, I'm lucky enough to have a selection for recording, and then maybe like a bit of a heavier set for live stuff. So in the studio, I'm using the Coropes. I've only got that A ride up because I had a bit of a rockier session earlier this week, but I normally use the Corope or a Constantinople, which are beautiful. And the Vidis hi-hats, which are the remake of the older sort of vintage sound, I find record amazingly well with very, very kind of minimal EQ on them, because they got such a natural, smooth, at high end. So I love those, and I use these for live as well now. So lovely range of Zildjians. Electronics wise, live, I'm using Roland gear. I've been with them for a couple of years now, and mainly live I'm using my SPDSX. But I've recently started using a lot more triggered stuff. So they sent me a TM6 Pro, which is the smaller unit, and I love it. I'm not just saying that because I'm with them, but usability and being able to change it's the attack of a sample. The triggers are really good and true to what you're playing, and I don't think I've had any sort of mishits with those. So yeah, I really love that module. So I've been using that electronics wise. Porter and Davis for the old kick up the bum is fantastic. I joined them 15 years ago. I've got number 14 of the BC2, and it's still going. It's amazing. Heads wise, I'm with Remo. Studio, it depends on the music. I flip between coated Emperors and coated Ambassadors for snare and the toms. And I've got Power Stroke 3 on most of the bass drums. Sometimes it's a bit lighter if I'm doing more jazzier things with like a smaller bass drum. But yeah, Remo coated though. I've got another recording kit, my Ludwig, which is a 1960s one. And for some reason, and I can't explain the science, it sounds best with a coated Emperor on top and a coated Ambassador on the bottom. All a bit geeky, but I love all of that stuff. Yeah. And put it all in the hard case stuff, who I've been with for donkey's years. So, and my sticks, Veta, 5 double Bs. Sounds a bit mental, but they're an extra half-inch longer. which is a bit strange because I've got arms like a monkey. I've got the longest arms, but I find that with the weight of those, like it's a little bit of extra weight in it. I just really like the feel of them, and I very rarely break these as well. So yeah, that's my gear.
Awesome. I've used Veta for a long time, and I love them. It's very rare to break one, and I'm doing a touring theatre tribute to Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. So it's like, Bonham.
Proper Bonham stuff. Yeah, love it.
They don't break. They get tired after maybe 6 or 7 shows, but that's testament to how good they are. If they can survive 5, 6, 7 shows where I'm doing an hour and 15 minutes of Bonham and an hour and 10 minutes of pace.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I like about them is the varnish is not too slippy.
Yeah.
Because I used to have a nightmare with that and hit singers in the back of heads, like, because I'm really going for it, and then go, oh no, my stick's gone.
Yeah.
But what I find though, and it depends how kind of geeky, which you want me to get about this, but I find it chips away, so I end up with sticks with like a half moon on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And they still don't break. So hats off. It's a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really good. If mine break, they break in a big way from rim shots, but they still don't like fall to bits. They just break in a fact that I'm playing the song. I'm like, okay, this stick's dying. Gone. Next one.
Yeah. Oh, they're great. Love them.
What age did you start drumming, and what music or artists inspired you?
Do you know what? I started pretty late. I didn't start till I was 16, 17. And I think the music that I was into, because I grew up in the 80s, and I remember sitting in front of the TV and watching the whole of Live Aid, all of it. I was there for hours. I watched the UK one, and then it flipped over to the American one, and it was just, I'd never seen anything like it. And so that really sparked my interest in musicians. But I was listening to mainly, it was a lot of heavy metal actually. I was into Slayer, the Rain in Blood album, loved it. And then I was into Wasp and Van Halen. And then I slowly, like, since the Live Aid thing, I began to listen to a lot more of the pop stuff. So Nick Kershaw, and I was a really big fan of Go West. And weirdly, I ended up being with them like 15 years. So that was pretty amazing. But I got more into the pop sort of sound, like In Excess. And I loved classic stuff like Zeppelin and Deep Purple. So it was a proper mix. Like, I wasn't too much of a music snob at that age, which I think a lot of younger kids are, and go, no, I'm a goth, or it's a metal thing, or I like emotional rock, or whatever it is. I just had the attitude of, if I like the sound of it, then I'll listen to it and buy it. And I really liked songs. It wasn't just about the musicianship. It was the songs. I just liked good songs, catchy songs, and the metal thing as well. Like, because I love the look of like the double bass. Kit in like a rap video, and Tom's going from here, going all the way down, and I thought, that's a good drummer. I want that.
Awesome. If you had to pick just one, could you tell us who your all-time favorite drummer is?
You can't ask me that, Tom. Oh.
Well, exactly. It's a hard one. I mean, I couldn't. I'd have to say, no, I can't tell you. Here's 5. So that's why it's a bit of a loaded question.
Yeah, it's, well, I mean, my all-time favorite drummer, I can think of one whose name comes to the top now, but I mean, there's just so many amazing players and so many like amazing influences. In the 80s, I was always well, late 80s into the 90s, I was always a big fan of Weckl and Vinny. But the thing that sticks out there is when I bought the video of the Buddy Rich, it's a memorial thing, and it had Weckl, Gad, and Vinny. And Vinny and Weckl were just, their skills are off the scale. I mean, it was just, I've never seen anything like it. But for me, listening to them just like playing all these amazing things was quite a spectacle. But Gad just played a quarter of what they played, but it was so catchy, it was so musical. So Gad's in the top group, but for me now, and they're all amazing, but I really like a drummer called Ricky Lawson. Ricky played on the first of the albums with the Yellow Jackets, and if you've not heard that album, check it out. It's beautiful. So Ricky Lawson also did all of the big sort of pop tours. He toured with Michael Jackson, and I went to see him about 25 years ago at a masterclass, and it really was like a masterclass. There's hundreds and hundreds of these sort of drum clinics and masterclasses around, but he was just amazing. It was usable information, and it was so musical about how he sets up a groove, what he listens for, like, because you can sit on like a bass line, but he said to pay attention like to where the bass notes stop, and that controls it's the level of swing. And he also had a thing, and again, I'm not sure like how much sort of geeky you would like me to get about this, but he said, and he wasn't the only one to say this. He said if you wanted to record like a backbeat exactly on the grid, but you want to make it sound lazy, push the previous 16th note a little bit early, so it creates like a bit of space. Yeah. So he had this thing, and you can hear it on a track called Matinee Idol on the Yellow Jackets album, and he was playing something like dum gat dum gat da dum, and that little space there of the dum gat made the backbeat sound like it was behind, but it wasn't. And things like that, just so musical. And he also talked about phrasing and phrasing off a vocal line, and to have the vocals as the loudest thing. If the singer's good, if the singer's not good, it's a bit of an issue. But he was saying, like, if you get a really good singer, play off them, and you'll make them feel good about themselves. So he's yeah, I mean, there's like hundreds of amazing players, but for me, I think Ricky Lawson. And there's a really good old sort of VHS film of him doing a masterclass at the MI in LA years ago, and he's just brilliant because he explains it all, and his thinking about how he like approaches the part and what works with the music. So yeah, Ricky Lawson, there you go. That's my favorite drummer.
It's great. I love it when people give different names, because that's the whole point of this, for people to watch it and go, right, I'm going to check that guy out.
Yes.
That's it. That's that. And I think as I've been doing this, it's kind of made me think about myself as well, because if someone asked me that question, I've realized that our influences, I think, or certainly for me, my influences have changed. My favorite drummers have changed over the years. So when I started drums, when I was like 14, 15, and I was 16, 17, my favorite drummer then is not going to be my favorite drummer now because we
Yeah.
obviously developed. But my original like favorite drummer obviously has left a mark on me and how I play and what I obviously still listen to. You know, yeah. So I think it's something that evolves as well, isn't it? When we're younger, we like different stuff to as we develop as players.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's what's the old sort of cliche? It's a musical journey, isn't it? But it's true. It's what you're into in your early 20s might not be the same as when you're in your 40s. So yeah, it is. I mean, I could try to listen to as much music as I can, and sometimes it's not the kit part, which is the bit I like. It might be like a vocal thing, and you can take that and apply it as a phrase and begin to mess around with it. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that I like doing.
What's the highlight of your career so far?
One of the highlights actually was last year. I got asked to be a dep like for Donovan Hepburn on the European leg of the Take That tour, and it was with like a bunch of mates really. A friend of mine, like Adam Wakeman, Wakeman's son, who normally plays with Ozzy Osbourne, he got asked like, to do the gig as well, and we've been mates for years and formed this crazy sort of prog band called Headspace, in which we wrote music that we could barely play because it was so difficult. So he was involved in it, and being part of that machine is just great. We actually had to rehearse on the other band's gear in the O2 because they had an 8-night sort of residency there. So we would go in and rehearse with the band in the daytime, and then they'd do the changeover, and then they'd do the big show in the evening. So working with them was really, really great, and all of the Take That guys were cool. But it's the songs as well. I mean, I never realised I was actually a big sort of Take That fan until I got to play the songs. And yeah, we had a great time. So that was a real highlight. Another highlight was almost getting killed by Roger Daltrey. About, when was it? 2002. I was on tour with Victoria Beckham. Maybe we'll edit that out, but we got asked to do. It was a charity sort of performance at the NEC, and it was a huge thing. Like there was an orchestra there, and we got asked to be the house band, and one of the artists was Roger Daltrey. So I got to play Pinball Wizard with him, and I was so excited about it. I was just like a coiled spring, just waiting to go. It's like, Roger Daltrey, right? I'm having this. And he was amazing. And you know how he does the mic swinging thing? He was in the middle of doing that, and the arc was just a perfect circle. But he walked sort of backwards, and he hit one of the monitors, and he kind of fell back. So the arc of the mic went like that, and I felt the mic just come over, and it scuffed my hair. If that had hit me, I would have been out, completely out. So like, I recount that story quite a lot because it's Roger Daltrey. Yeah, and thinking of other things. One more. It's not really, well, I mean, I suppose it is like part of my career, but I was at music college, and I got to take some private lessons with Bernard Purdy. Because he was over here for it was like a couple of months on a tour, and he came into the college as a professor of funk, which I can't think of a better person to be the professor of funk. He's just the biggest character. He's fantastic, and I love his playing anyway. So it was nice to spend a few weeks with him. But this was what 1996 or whatever it was, and it still sort of remains with me. Like I got lessons with Bernard Purdy, and it was brilliant.
Cool.
And he did the hi hat thing, like the videos he does. Like, hey, oh God, that's it. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that must have been amazing because watching videos of him like playing a groove, and he's sitting there going, "Yeah, this," just like the way what a personality. It just
he really is exactly like that, though, or he was then.
yeah.
And because he's just sort of so into it, and and the first day that I met him, and he went, "Richard, I played with," and he reeled off this list, and I went, "I know, that's kind of why I'm here." Good times.
He reeled off his clanger list or whatever you said.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
Like, stop there. That's enough.
That's all you need. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Amazing.
Do you know Bob Knight?
Yes, I know Bob very well.
Because I spoke to him yesterday, and he said the same thing about Bernard Purdy and stuff. You guys weren't. It wasn't at a similar time that you were.
Well, because Bob went to the Royal College, I think, didn't he?
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was at the now sort of defunct Musicians Institute in London.
Okay.
Yeah, no, me and Bob and like a bunch of other like the working sort of players, all kind of came up through the ranks like together, and it started off on Saturdays on CD UK. Like, do you remember that? Or you?
I do. Yeah.
Right. So, and it was all like mimes. So we'd all sort of meet up in the canteen and go, "Who are you here with today?" Got Craig Phillips from Big Brother, and like I'd be there with Victoria because that was around the time like I did the Beckham gig. And what about you, All Saints? And then we'd all go to the pub and get pissed.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. Mime is money.
Did you record that stuff?
Yeah, I did the first album. I mean, the sort of premise behind Headspace was we were all mates, and we met doing the gig like for Adam's Old Man, Rick Wakeman. As I did that many years ago, and met the bass player Lee Pomeroy, who is now playing with ELO. Yeah, and a guitarist called Pete Rinaldi, who's the MD for Dido now, and the singer Damien, who's bonkers but great. So we liked sort of hanging out, and we thought we should form a band. We should do some writing together, like the classic pub. Yeah, man, this is great fun. And probably unexpectedly, it became a prog thing, like because we're all like into the odd meter thing, but we made it so difficult.
So I know Derby quite well.
Oh yeah.
And they played literally Moat Park, which is like a stone's throw from this studio. And Derby asked me to tech for him. That must have been 3 years ago.
Oh right, yeah.
So I obviously met them all, and I was behind Derby on stage while he was playing that stuff, and I was just like, like my brain is exploding.
Oh my God, yeah. The first album was properly tricky to play. I mean, I remember pulling my hair out like trying to record it.
Yeah.
But like around that time, because I just had like my second kid, and we did like a European tour, and we thought, right, so with everyone's schedules, we've got 3 days in which like to rehearse this whole album. And we were all going, there's no way that we're going to be able to pull this off. But somehow, and there was a lot of mistakes in it, but somehow we like managed to get through that. But it's by far, that's the hardest thing that I've ever done.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was just sitting there just like, just bonkers.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a thing when you can't play your own parts, which you wrote.
I thought Derby having to learn the parts.
Well, I mean, the sort of big joke was that he is the only person who can actually play all of the headspace stuff properly. Good lad, Darby.
When you first get a gig with a new artist, how do you work out what you've got to play? So do you just listen to the stuff? Do you transcribe it? Are you given the sheet music, in the real world? Because obviously a lot of our students are used to just being given the sheet music on the screen or in
Yeah.
their grade book or whatever. So how does it work in the real world?
Well, just to make a comment about the reading thing, I think everyone should learn to read. I think it's one of the basic skills that you need to have, because it just makes you more employable. And when I get asked to do a new artist, I listen to it, and if I'm working as the MD, then I've got to be aware of what everyone is meant to be playing, and take on board like any requests from the artist. So if they want to go in a little bit of a different thing feel wise, like to the original, then I've got to take that on board. So my role as a drummer is a lot easier, because if I'm not the MD, I just get told what they want, and that's great. For example, last year on the with the Take That thing, the versions of the songs that we were sent were from the full sort of 2.5 hour show with the big sort of production. But the European one was out on like a slightly smaller scale, and a lot of the incidental music was, so it could feature all of the production value. So those obviously would not be in it. So I didn't learn what I got sent 100%, because I knew there would be changes. And I think the danger is, if you listen to something over and over and over again, it becomes like a muscle memory thing. So for that gig, I had to be wary of that, and it wasn't until we got into rehearsals that the arrangements were actually sort of finalised, and those were changed like right up until the wire. So if I'm in charge of an artist, though, I tend to learn it off by heart once we get into rehearsals. But if I'm MDing it, I've also got to keep an ear out to make sure that all of the other parts are there, and what's going on the backing track. And like with the production thing, is there going to be sort of time code on the hard disk as well, like to run the lights or whatever it is. But if it's a straight ahead sort of gig, I tend to write sort of cheat sheets and try to remember what the right sort of part is, and like to be sort of consistent with it. So if you can learn, it's a pop song, learn the words, because that helps you remember where you are. Unless the singer messes up, which hardly ever happens. So yeah, I mean, it's like the repetition, and also like to get the groove right, and remember the level of, if it's like a swung 16s thing, then working with the bass player to make sure you know what level of swing it is. If it's a neo soul thing, it would be like completely different to like a funk sort of shuffle. So just it's attention to detail, I think. But cheat sheets are really good, and learning to read is key, because if in rehearsals, if something gets changed and you need to catch like a set of accents or whatever, write them down, because then there's no like ambiguity, and you've got to be able to read and like to transcribe, like to be able to do that quickly and know it's it's right, because the key with reading is trying to play it with a lot of confidence. Because if your reading's not great, then you always have like a question mark above your head going, is this right? Is this quite right? I think that's it, rather than that's it. I know it's that.
Mm. Yeah.
So, yeah, learn to read and write cheat sheets.
Excellent. That's really good advice. And yeah, I strongly feel like why would you not learn to read? It can only help you. People that say, no, I don't want to learn to read, I just want to play. That's fine, and I'm all for that. I suppose it depends what they want to play for. If they want to just play for a bit of fun,
Yeah.
then cool. But if they want to take it seriously, I'll very much encourage them to do the reading, because why wouldn't you? I mean, people that say, oh, I can't read, I do feel like, well, it's not actually that hard. It's just like, a few dots. Like, it's not, I mean, I would be useless at melodic music. That's not my thing. That's a lot harder. Like with
Yeah.
drums, it's only like kick, snare, hi-hat, a few toms, a few rhythms, You
Yeah.
can learn to read basic drum music in one lesson with a good teacher, really.
Yeah. Well, do you know how I sort of learned to read?
How?
My first sort of pro gig was in the holiday camps. So it was the Haven Parks, which are like the Butlins thing, with loads of caravans, and then there's like an entertainment sort of centre. And I joined a house band, and we do like a couple of sets a night, plus at the weekends we'd like have to play with the cabaret. So it was like a visiting singer, or it was a magic act, or it was a kid sort of puppet thing. And they asked me, it's like, how's your reading? And I said, my reading's fine. Now, what I thought was fine was being able to read Louis Belson page 4, a line at a time, without making a mistake, like proper 1 and 2 and 3 and rest and 1 and yeah, man, I'm a reader. And my God, the first night we had we had in someone who was an Al Jarreau impersonator, and he'd had all of the parts transcribed, Steve Gadd parts, right? And he said, drums, here you go. And I went, what's this then? And I opened it up. I was going, oh my God. It meant nothing to me. And it was an utter car crash. And I messed up every act for at least a month. Like real people shouting at me, screaming at me, throwing things at me to keep playing. Because I'd be going, bah, and they're like going, there's another 2 choruses. And it was in front of a couple of thousand people, because these rooms were huge, and it was awful. And I learned to read in 6 weeks. It was just the most horrendous experience. So don't lie, kids. Well, no, I mean, it wasn't a lie, because I thought I was all right at it. I had no idea. So learn to read.
I suppose that's the other thing while we're talking about reading, that someone might give you a chart on a gig and you look at it and you're like, oh, wow, this is different to what I'm used to. Because with drum music, unfortunately, there is no like universal drum music. There's kind of, this is the kind of the normal thing, but then you open another book, and you go, oh, okay, where's the hi-hat?
That's a good point, actually. Over the course of that holiday park experience, the range of the writing was like from that like Al Jarreau thing, which was perfect. It was beautifully sort of written out. I just couldn't read it. To just rubbish. Like I remember one artist came in and he had 8 bars written with a big 8, and it just said drums. It had repeat bars at either end, and it said times 32. I'm just like, this isn't going to go well, is it? It's just rubbish. But I mean, sometimes I get a lead sheet, so it might be like a piano part or like a horn part, and I don't mind those, because then like you've got ideas of what the horns, if it's a horn part, what the horns will be playing, and you can kind of pick and choose which of the accents like to bring out a little bit. So those I don't mind. but you have to be able to read is the rhythm of it and the length of the notes, because the length of a note, it dictates what sound of the kit you might want to use. If it's a short note, then you can accent those on snare. If it's a longer note, then you might want to move to an open hi-hat or a roll or like a crash cymbal. So it's just more of a sort of musical, like to be aware of what all of the other parts are doing as well.
Yeah. Have you ever had anything go wrong on stage that you've had to recover from that you can tell us about?
Yeah. One thing that instantly sort of comes to mind was I fell off the back of a drum riser.
Too.
It really hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I was on. I mean, my kit was too big, like for the riser, so my stool was like about that far off the edge, and I was in a particularly like energetic mood, and I was really whacking the crash cymbals like that. And at one point, I actually got off the stool like to hit a crash cymbal, and went like that, straight off the back, legs up in the air. It was like a perfect sort of comedy thing, and landed flat on my back, and the laughing from the rest of the band. It was just that was one thing that went horrendously wrong. And the other thing, at the end of the Take That tour last year, it was the last show, and I'd invited like a couple of friends down. In fact, so Graham Russell was there. Like, do you know him and his shot? Because he was over in Switzerland, and I thought, oh, it'd be nice to see him and have like a couple of beers. And I thought, right, I'm having this tonight. And we did the pack check because we're all on ears, and we each have a pack. Just before we go on, we do like it's a mic check with the packs with the monitor guy, and everything was fine, and we're all getting sort of geared up, and music went on and the lights went off, and we all went up, and I thought, I can't hear anything, and the cable in my ears somehow from that pack check to the riser had just stopped working. So I'm going, not now. So the first song, there's been sort of quite a heavy sort of left-hand part on the keyboards. Sorry, right-hand part. Ding, 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 ding. And I was just watching like Dave's hand for about 3/4 of the first song, and I motioned to get my tech up and said, my ears are not working. Can you go and get the spares in my backpack that's in the dressing room? He went, what? And just ran off and came back with the wrong spares. So we had to go back again. And I'm just watching like Dave's hand. Just that was just the worst feeling. It's horrendous, because if you take your ears out on a pop gig and everyone's on ears, the stage is really, really quiet. So it is like impossible to tell what's coming out front, because you get the delay of it hitting the back wall. So you're going to be completely out of time. And yeah, that was just horrendous.
Wow.
And it was the only gig like I had to make there. Typical.
Yeah, I mean, well, there you go. There's a thing for your tech there, a thumbs up, because if he wasn't there.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I would have had to go, can we stop?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, that
everyone.
So you don't have any backup. So for a gig like that, there's no backup monitors or anything. It's just
no. There's a spare pack, but like everyone's got molds. So and like I forgot in the sound check like to bring up the spares like I normally do, and it was the only night I'm just going, yeah, I've not brought those up either, have I?
I've had that exact problem where the cable going into the ears goes wrong, and I've got my older spare pair just here. But even still, you know, there's no way you could, if you haven't got a tech there, there's no way you can, you know, while trying to one-handed play. It's just not.
Yeah, go. I'll be 1 minute. I'll be right back. Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, doesn't work, does it?
Oh wow. With gigs like the Take That gig, in terms of electronics and stuff,
Yeah.
I imagine there's quite a lot of backing tracks going on. Is that something that you are in control of as the drummer, or does someone else?
No, it depends on the gig. If it's like I do a gig called the Rewind, which is like an '80s thing, and it's a multi-artist house band, so we get 17 artists over a weekend. It's a bit of a nightmare, that gig, because there's so much to kind of remember. So for that, I'm in charge of the hard disk. For something like a big pop tour, like you're going to have a dedicated operator,
Yeah.
so you can kind of focus more on the performance.
Yeah.
But electronics wise, I mean, I have to say, because I've known this at Donovan for like a few years, and he's a monster player. He's amazing, and he's one of the nicest, most humble men I've ever met. And he could not have helped me out more, like to transition with the gig. And he sent me all of the samples. He had an Excel sort of spreadsheet with the set list and what's used on what, and we had long chats about the way it's sort of played. So for that gig, I had the rig sort of designed like for that show. So we arranged all of the pads. I had a couple of pads over here and another one there, and then I had a range of pads here and like a kick trigger. But he helped me out so much, like with all of that. And then for the sounds, I used the TM6, and we also had like a trigger on the kick and the snare, and the side snare as well. So I had to get my head around like how to use that, because I'd never used one before. But it was so intuitive and so sort of natural about how to cut off, say, like a transient at the beginning of a sample, and then to shorten the sort of tail of it was just like, oh, it's the same dial, but if you press it down, it goes into that. So that was actually sort of quite easy to get hold of, really. But yeah, for the big sort of production stuff and the time code, that's all run by as a separate person, and which is actually quite nice, because it relieves the pressure, so it's not your fault if it goes wrong.
If you as the drummer are, in that case, I imagine, playing along to a click and probably lighting, pyro, so things like smoke, fire, projections, video, that's all going to be run from that click. You know, it's all in that click. So if you as a drummer go wrong or fall off the back of the drum riser, or play out of time with the click, or then it's quite a big catastrophe, I suppose. It could be.
It's not great. No. No, I mean, when you get to that level, you can't make mistakes. I mean, unless it's a thing where you're falling off the back of the drum riser, but it's, I mean, all of that, it gets worked out in rehearsals and the production rehearsals. So it's a bit of pressure, but it's the job. And everyone's worked pretty hard their whole life to get up to that sort of level, but you've got to be able to handle that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
Whether you're as a drummer or like a bass player or whatever, and make sure you do your homework. If you don't do your homework, you're not going to get hired.
What are your hobbies away from drumming?
I would probably say being a studio geek. I know that's not a million miles away from drums, but since I got this place and I moved in here, about 5 years ago, and I knew nothing about recording, nothing. Like I had a bit of a budget, and I'd been sort of collecting mics and preamps for years, going, one day I'm going to have a proper sort of studio. And but I was getting a terrible sound, and I didn't know what I was working out with mic placement, with sounds, with tuning even. Because when you're recording, it's all so micro focused, you can hear everything. So if it's not right, it becomes a massive thing. So I spent a lot of time on YouTube learning about engineering, and where I am, it's like a complex. So everyone here is a muso, and James, who's the guy over the courtyard, is a really fantastic engineer. So I got to know him pretty fast, and he just showed me loads of things. So I'd have to say, if I'm not playing drums, then I'm being like a bit of a studio geek. I know that sounds a bit sad, like I should be out on the bike more and running or sailing or something, but yeah, studio stuff, and listening like to interviews with like a bunch of producers and find out how they got like a particular sound. So it's kind of drum related, but away from all of that is the family, is the kids, and watching them sort of grow up. There's not really time to have a hobby.
I think there is no denying this, that for all of us, drums started out as a hobby when we're a kid or a teenager, and then we are lucky enough, whether it's teaching or whether it's playing or whether it's recording, we're lucky enough that it becomes our job, you know, and pays bills. And so it's kind of a strange one, because it then still, I feel it's still very much my hobby, because if you took drums away from me, I'd be like, oh, hang on, what else do I do? I mean, I like cars, I like tinkering around with my car, but that's kind of, you know, this so I think that's where we're really lucky, because it, even if it is our job, I think it's still a hobby as well, because if you like have a snare drum and you like clean it up and tinker around with it, that's kind of, you know, it's a hobby.
Yeah, I mean, finding, like, especially recently, I'm actually having more time to practice, and that's become a hobby. Whereas it should be like part of your job, but sometimes like there just isn't enough hours. Like if you're learning a set, or if you're having to get a bunch of remote tracks done and then get back to sort the family out and spend quality time with your kids and all that, there's just not enough hours. So now I'm actually back in the sort of practice mode, and I'm finally, like, because I've got a bookshelf of all these sort of drum books, and I buy these from time to time, and I go, right, I'm so going to get into that, and then they get stacked on the shelf, and they've been there for 5 years and I've not looked at it. So now I'm actually going through like a couple and going, right, I think I'll do this one today.
Page 12, go.
Yeah, can't play it. I suck.
Oh, hang on a minute. 4 bars times 32. Great.
Yeah. That old chestnut, yeah.
What's your favourite biscuit?
You can't ask me that. Okay. A frozen, it's got to be put in the freezer, Tunnock's caramel wafer. I don't know if that classifies as a biscuit.
Oh.
But if you put a Tunnock's caramel wafer in the freezer and have it with a hot cup of coffee, it instantly melts the chocolate, and then you get through to a cold bit that slowly melts the caramel. I'm freaking you out, aren't I?
You've blown my mind.
But
wow.
even if it's a chocolate hobnob, whatever, or a rich tea, put them in the freezer.
How long are we talking though? Like,
doesn't matter as long as they're frozen.
Oh, like proper frozen.
Proper, yeah. Like overnight.
Right.
You will thank me for that. I'm telling you.
I'm gonna have to give it a go. I haven't got any of the Tunnock's.
Oh, get them.
but my granddad was a big fan of those. So I've eaten a lot of those in my time, but never a frozen one.
Yeah, do it. You will email me and go, thanks so much for that tip about the frozen.
Well, I said that I was making a graph about the most popular ones. I have to say that one,
0.
bottom, no one said that. That's an unusual one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I run my own race.
Are you a dunker? But the obvious answer is yes. You're not going to freeze it like an ice pop.
Who's not a dunker?
I
don't trust those people that don't dunk.
If you could give one bit of advice to up-and-coming drummers, what would that be?
Just one? Can I give it a
couple?
couple?
You can give more than one, but
all right.
Really, I mean, like, what's the most important bit of advice? But yeah, you can give more than one.
Okay. First thing I would say, play seemingly simple things exceptionally well. Like learning where the backbeat should fall, feel things. Like if you can play simple things really, really well, then you'll work. If you're solid and you're consistent, that's a big thing. Second thing, if I'm only going to give two, I would also have to say, if you're serious about trying to make a little bit of a living in the music industry, people skills are absolutely essential, because sometimes if there's like an audition sort of process for like a big gig, try not to discount yourself, because there are a lot of really flashy kind of players there. They might not be the right fit. So it's not about who is the best sort of player. It's about who is the best fit for whatever gig. I think that's really important. And being confident but not having a huge ego, I think, is important, because who wants to be on the back of a bus for 6 weeks with someone who they just find unholy irritating? The answer is no one. And so yeah, just and be like prepared to grow a bit of a thick skin. Your life's not going to revolve about that one sort of gig that you didn't get. Sorry, I just got an email there. Did you hear the beep? Yeah, move on from things. If it doesn't sort of work out, move on. Try and learn from that. I think that one of the biggest lessons, or the biggest like inspirations, which I had was being sacked from a band about 20 years ago, who were quite a successful sort of jazz thing in America. And after 3 tours, I got sacked because they said that I didn't have the right sort of feel, and I was absolutely crushed. So you can either just go, I'm rubbish, like I never want to play again, or whatever. Like I got in the practice room and I worked on nothing but feel for months. So if that hadn't have happened, then I probably wouldn't have worked as hard on feel and analysing where things sort of fall on the grid, as it were. So yeah, I think that's all for now.
Rich, thank you so much for spending your time with us here at DrumWise today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
You're very welcome. It's been fun, Tom. Hope we get to do it again.
Yeah.